Hello and welcome back to Bristol News, and at this time for the next 13 nights, well, it's head to head. I meet each of the candidates standing for Bristol Mayor, some with hope, some with just a little more expectation, who will be asking for your vote come May the 5th. Now don't forget, you can join in, you can tell us what you make of what you're hearing, you can contact us, the details coming up on your screen right now. Tonight though, the honour of kicking off the Mayoral Marathon is Tom Baldwin for TUSC, the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. Tom, thanks very much indeed for joining us. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad.
Good to see you. Let's just talk first of all about where you come from, your background, what you stand for. Kind of old-time socialist. Is that fair to say? Haven't times changed? Haven't they moved on a little bit from the types of politics you're eschewing?
I don't think they have moved on. And in fact, if things have changed, it's because they've gotten worse. Because we've got a government that is taking away from ordinary people in this country, taking the most from those who can afford it least, and giving it to the very richest. And it might be an old idea that we oppose that.
It sounds a bit like a broken record, though, doesn't it, to some people? You know, it's them against us, it's the establishment against the working people.
But it is still. That hasn't changed. And, you know, the last 5 or 6 years has proved that, in my opinion. If you look at the stats of who gets hit hardest by what this government's doing, you know, we've seen the richest getting richer, and yet the rest of us are taking cuts. And you know, that's still true.
Everybody's taking cuts, aren't they?
Well, yeah, we're taking pay cuts and the richest are taking cuts to their taxes that they pay. So, yeah, we're all facing cuts, but they're facing good ones and we're facing bad ones.
Let's look at this whole anti-austerity thing, because that's your platform, isn't it?
That's the central thrust of what we're saying, yes.
What is austerity?
Well, it's the programme of cuts and privatisation that's being pushed by the government, but is being implemented on a local level by our representatives here. And really, it's a programme of Robin Hood in reverse, of taking money out of the pockets of ordinary working class people and giving it to their mates in big business.
Well, let me I mean, austerity means the state of reduced spending and increased frugality, being frugal, looking after your finances. And austerity measures taken by governments to reduce expenditure in an attempt to shrink their growing budget deficits. Which bit of that do you disagree with?
Where it's coming from. If the idea was that the country was so broke, then how come they can afford to give these tax cuts to the very richest? How come they are able to look at renewing Trident nuclear missiles at enormous cost? It's not a case that there's not the money. It's a case of the political will of this government and who they represent. And sadly, on a local level, we've got people that are carrying out Tory policy.
And I'm delighted you come to the local level, because but the two are mixed, and you'll understand why I'm asking these questions, because it's managing the economy after a terrible, terrible period of austerity. The crash of 2008, that had to be managed. It's all very well for people like you saying we need money for this, that and the other thing, but the pot is only so big, isn't it?
It had to be sorted out, but if you remember back to 2007, 2008, it wasn't nurses or care workers or the people that sweep the streets or librarians that caused that crisis. It was, you know, detonated in the banking sector, unregulated speculation and gambling with, you know, fake money basically. You know, this is a crisis of the capitalist system, and yet it's the victims of that are the ones that are paying the price for it.
As the crisis of the capitalist system, what are you going to do as Mayor of Bristol? How are you going to fight this great institution that is downtrodden the working people?
Well, in terms of what the Mayor controls, it's a budget of, you know, £350 million. There's been over £100 million cut since Ferguson has become Mayor, and more before that under the Lib Dem administration. And so,
which he had to do because of what the government had
Well, no,
passed
it's
on?
what the government you know, pushed upon him. I accept that it's coming from the Tories, but I do think that leaves local representatives with a choice. Are they going to stand up for this city, for ordinary people and for the things that we need, or are they going to, you know, meekly give in and do as the Tories are demanding? And, you know,
so how are you going to manage this? You're Mayor tomorrow.
Yeah.
You stand for equality, don't you? You stand for everybody getting a fair crack of the whip. You're going to be a mayor for all of Bristol. Is that right? Is equality the key thing for you?
Yeah, equality and fairness, I suppose, but it takes some very practical steps to deliver that. As I say,
So you're going to surround yourself with a rainbow cabinet then that represents everybody in this city, are you?
No, I mean, I'm looking at representing you can use the phrase the 99%. I think it's more than that. Ordinary people, working class, middle class
who's
people.
the other 10%?
Not it's less than 10% in it, but the very, very wealthiest. They're the only ones that are benefiting from.
So you'd have Conservatives on your cabinet.
I wouldn't have Conservatives on my cabinet.
So they're the 9%, are they?
The one, it's out of 100.
What, 30 odd councillors?
I wouldn't have them in there because I don't think they represent the interests of ordinary people.
So the 30 councillors on the council who are Conservative will not be represented under your cabinet?
Well, they would still be on the council, obviously, but no, they wouldn't be in my cabinet.
Lib Dems?
No, I don't think I'd have Lib Dems in there either.
Sorry,
the dividing line would be, are they willing to oppose austerity, to put themselves on the line if necessary, to defend the services that this city needs, or are they going to put their careers first?
So let me just get it. So as a mayor of equality, you're basically saying it's equal as long as we don't have any Conservatives or any Liberal Democrats on your cabinet? Where's the fair play in that?
Well, what they're doing is not fair play, and what they have been doing,
they're banned.
And we wouldn't want them in there. I mean, the transfer of wealth from the poorest to the richest under the Tories has been incredible, and it's got to be stopped. And I don't think the Tories are going to oppose that. And so, no, I don't think they've a place. As part of the running of the city.
And the people who voted, just because there's a key point, so the people who voted Conservative and Lib Dem are not going to be represented on the cabinet of Bristol.
I wouldn't say that that's true.
You just said that, haven't you?
No, I'd say that
they're not welcome.
The councillors wouldn't, but actually I wouldn't say that the Tory party represents the majority of people that vote for them. Actually, the people that the Tory party is actually benefiting, it's such a tiny minority of people. They couldn't possibly win an election with those. Look at what they've done.
But they won a general election, didn't they? They got rid of the coalition.
With less than a quarter of the electorate voting for them. And they also won it at a time when there was very, very little opposition to the ideas of austerity and the arguments that they were putting forward.
A lot of what you're talking about, Tom Baldwin, it comes into everyday life, doesn't it? It comes into education, it comes into transport to a degree, but certainly keen on disabled and disability issues. Housing is a big one in Bristol, isn't it? Aren't they sorting the housing problem at the minute on the council?
If they are, they're not doing it fast enough. I haven't heard concrete plans. I mean, George Ferguson has been talking about...
There's a 30-year plan, isn't there, for more council houses, for thousands of more council houses?
Ferguson has been, expounding the fact that he's building council houses for the first time in years, but the numbers are pitiful. It's single figures or double figures, whereas we've got 11,000 plus people on the council house waiting list in Bristol. This has been, I think, the hot topic of this, but it links into everything else as well. We're becoming a city where ordinary people are finding it increasingly unaffordable to live here, and that's got to be addressed.
But the council house is, I mean, through the Labour years that you would, I suppose, you're not too keen on the current Labour Party, is that right? So I'm just trying to find out exactly where your allegiances lie. But through the Labour years, that's when the council houses all but disappeared, isn't it?
Well, in the Blair years, obviously that started off under Thatcher with the selling off of council houses. And, in terms of my relationship to the Labour Party, the Labour Party of Blair was not a Labour Party, in my opinion. I think there's two parties in one there now.
But how would you address that if you say they're only starting now after years of not having maybe 3 decades of not building council houses, and that is starting with the council? How are you going to suddenly come in as Mayor of Bristol with your nearly rainbow cabinet and get these council houses built? Where are they going to come from?
Well, we've got to step up the pace of what's being done massively. I think if you look at what other other candidates are saying, they're talking about a couple of thousand a year. I think that's got to be the minimum that we do. But they have to be council houses. I think it has to be owned by us. I think that's the only way that we can democratically make sure that we've got low rents that people need. We can guarantee the quality of accommodation.
There's the right to buy, though, isn't there, Tom, from the council, which is stymieing this whole thing, isn't it?
I oppose the right to buy, actually. I think with council houses, what you should have is a secure lifetime tenancy, and what you do have. But yeah, I mean, you know, if that is the case, that's a government policy that needs opposing.
You'd have to fight the government as well for transport, wouldn't you? Because you want to get the buses back into public ownership and get the council running the buses. But again, there's the deregulation. That comes from on high. It's not something that as mayor you'd be able to change tomorrow, is it?
Not something you'd be able to change immediately. I do think that there are steps that you could take. I mean, the first thing that you could do is quality contracts, so you can exercise more control over what the private companies are doing. You could set up a publicly owned company and, you know, compete and prove that that's better, that you can run it at a lower cost. But I do think, again, this is something where we have to challenge the national policy, because only if it's owned by us can we decide the fares and the routes democratically, rather than having to go begging to First every time we want to keep a route on.
The time flies past, it really does. Let me just get a quick response to you from this. This is the Darren Wright Foundation. They do brilliant work, don't they, for disabled children and children with life-limiting illnesses. They're asking, can you guarantee that there'll be no more cuts to disability services? It's a big ask for any mayor, isn't it?
That's exactly what I want, is to not only stop and reverse the cuts that have been made so far, but to actually improve the provision that we've got in this city. But it brings back to the central point of what I'm saying, which is about austerity and the cuts. No part of any mayor's programme will be able to deliver unless we take on the government and build the kind of campaign that is necessary to win back the funding that's been stolen from the city. By 2020, we'll have lost 78% of the funding that comes from central government. But it's a weak government. They were pushed back on the latest round of disability benefit cuts. I think if we take a stand, we can push them back on this as well. All right.
What chance have you got, in a word?
Some.
Some. Okay. Oh, good. Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. Tom Baldwin. Thanks very much indeed. So there we are. That is Tom Baldwin of the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. Of course, the mayoral election takes place on May the 5th. 13 candidates to look forward to over the nights here. Here are the details coming up for you. And tomorrow on Bristol News, the other end really of the political spectrum from Tom, when I'm going to go head to head with the Conservative candidate Charles Lucas. That's tomorrow, same time. Till then, from your City TV channel, from all of us here, bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.